joined me a short time ago. Senator Kovacic, welcome back to Radio National Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
What did Indian community leaders tell you in the wake of these comments from Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price?
There were probably two key things that they said to us yesterday. And firstly, before that, they were grateful for our attendance, the fact that we came out and were happy to have these conversations face to face. I think that's important to articulate. But number one is that they were upset and they were hurt by the comments and that they didn't consider the comments to be true. And I think understandably, that is why it was so important that Susan, along with Senator Paul Scar, Julian Leeser and myself, took the time yesterday afternoon to talk face-to-face with the Australian Indian community in Harris Park.
What assurances did you give to the community?
I've spent a lot of time in Harris Park. I've dealt with the community there in many different ways, including very grateful for their support during the 2022 election campaign. So I had a very open discussion with them. I think the most important thing is to be honest in your interactions and tell people that you acknowledge that the commentary was hurtful, but also acknowledge that it was untrue. So I think that is one of the most important things that we can do in order to repair, the damage that has been done there.
Did you say to members of the community that you were sorry that this had taken place?
Look, I didn't. It didn't come up in a direct conversation with anybody that I spoke to. The ongoing message that we had both, in our interactions, in people speaking to us, was around the fact that it wasn't true. It was entirely inaccurate, that the contributions of the Australian Indian community, as it is with many, many other multicultural communities, is really valuable. They have values of hard work, community service, supporting the family unit, people that actually make an important and meaningful contribution to our country. And that is something that not only should we value, but openly acknowledge.
Should Senator Nampijinpa-Price have stayed aligned with the Nationals rather than switching to the Liberal Party room?
Look, that's a matter for Senator Nampijinpa-Price, and perhaps you can have her on the show to have a chat about that, but that's not something that I'm going to reflect on. I think multiculturalism is something that is very important to the broader coalition, and speaking for the Liberal Party and particularly New South Wales Liberals, I can say that, we have a great migrant story, as does Australia.
Senator Nampijinpa-Price has also criticised senior Liberal colleague Alex Hawke, accusing him of cowardly behaviour and accusing him of berating her staff over his concerns about the Indian migrant comments. Senator Price is suggesting that the Liberals' women problem is internal. Is she right?
I'm not going to reflect on any conversation between two colleagues. I have no knowledge of that conversation. What I will say is that Alex has been a very strong supporter of the Indian Australian community. I used to be one of his constituents many, many years ago, and I have many times interacted with him, with the Australian Indian community, along with Julian Leeser and other federal MPs. And I know that many of his constituents, as with many of the people that we met with late yesterday afternoon, were incredibly disappointed by Senator Nampijinpa-Price's comments. In terms of a broader issue in relation to, female engagement in the Liberal Party, I think that ultimately what we need to do is ensure that all voices are clearly heard in terms of robust debate, and I think I'm a good example of that.
When was this trip to Harris Park, when was it organised?
Look, I'm not going to sort of provide any information on that. That's a matter that, with the Leader's Office in terms of their scheduling. I had, fair advance notice of it. So I think it's important. And I'm local as well, so it doesn't take me very long to get to Harris Park, less than 15 minutes. So for me, it was a pleasure to be there, and I was happy to go along yesterday afternoon.
Was it organised before these comments by Senator Nampijinpa-Price or after?
I wouldn't be able to answer that for you.
You were notified after those comments, though, it sounds like?
Oh, I was, yes, but I wouldn't know when it was organised. So it's not unusual. And again, these are matters of, diary management, etc. Senator Paul Scar is a Queensland senator, so, he had and is the shadow immigration and multiculturalism minister. So he himself would have travel arrangements. As I said, this is part of my local community. So for me, it's no effort to be there, and it's not unusual to meet with communities with, a day or two's notice as well.
Do you think that Senator Nampijinpa Price's comments were damaging?
I think they were hurtful. I really do. And that's something that I noticed yesterday. I noticed people who were impacted by those comments because it is entirely inconsistent with who they are. Their contribution to this country is based on actually participating and assimilating and being a part of the community and actually making Australia a better place. One of the businesses we went to yesterday is one that provides free meals every single Tuesday to people in need. That's a reflection of who our Indian Australian community is. People who stepped up during the COVID pandemic and provided food hampers, people who participate in different charities and provide supermarket bags to people in need. That is a reflection of who they are.
If the Coalition wants to return to government, how important is it for the Coalition to get these relationships right with multicultural Australia?
Well, I would say to you that we do have these relationships right. Situations like last week, whether it was a misunderstanding, whether, it was an error, whether it was, something taken out of context, the important thing is that when something like that occurs, that you quickly go to repair that. And that's what Susan Lee, our leader, demonstrated yesterday when we went to Harris Park. What we need to do as a coalition looking to come back into government is to listen to Australians and understand what is important to them. And that is exactly what we are doing. And yesterday was a very clear example of that.
But when you're talking about the Coalition already doing this, if we look at the figures of the top 50 electorates with the highest proportion of first and second generation migrants, only 2 of those are held by the Liberal Party.
Look, there's no question that the election result that we were delivered on the 3rd of May was terrible. We were smashed. We got it wrong. What that tells us is that we need to reframe what we've been doing, because clearly the messaging about who we are and what we offer to Australians hasn't cut through because people didn't vote for us. We need to be clearer about that. But also, in addition to that, we need to listen to Australians. We need to understand where we've missed the mark in communicating with everyday Australians.
You're listening to Radio National Breakfast. My guest is Liberal Senator Maria Kovacic. On a separate issue, the federal government will be releasing its 2035 climate target in the coming weeks, while the opposition is still debating about whether to continue support net zero at all. The Shadow Minister, Dan Tehan, will be heading to the US to look at nuclear research. Does that disappoint you, given you've called on the party to drop the nuclear option?
Look, I've been very clear in the past about my support for net zero and our transition to renewable energy, and my views on that haven't changed. When I spoke publicly about nuclear, I spoke specifically about our policy of state-owned nuclear reactors, which we took to the last election. I don't have an issue with lifting the moratorium on nuclear. That allows Australian markets to make a decision about whether something is feasible. That allows Australian markets to make a decision about whether they want to invest in emerging technologies. I think that's a good thing, that, that's based on core Liberal values. I think that more broadly, what we need to do is that we need to remember that we need to be developing policy that we can implement in 2028, not rehashing policies that we took to 2025. Because whether people like it or not, this government has a mandate to continue to implement their energy policies for the next 3 years. The next election will be in 2028. So we need to put a lens of what the energy grid will look like at that point over any development of energy policy.
New South Wales Liberal Senator Maria Kovacic, thank you so much for your time this morning.
You're most welcome.